This is the story of how I lost all my fingers on my right hand and relearned how to play Xbox with that disability. I talked about this story before, at least to some extent. You can find it here, but I didn't really talk about the process and what also went into trying to game again with a disability. I talked about this accident on my channel before. You can find the video here, but when it happened, I was 21 years old, or about to turn 21, and had no clue what this whole thing would mean to my life, if that makes sense. Like, I had no idea how challenging it would be or how much would change after that accident, how even, I obviously knew some things will change, but I still had this hope that I could mostly do things that I did before, and thankfully so, because I was able to stay positive through the whole experience. I was supported, and I was carried a lot by my family and friends, and I was able to focus on healing and focusing on moving forward through all the multiple surgeries I had that year. I remember the first week after the accident, I had no clue how much was left of my hand. So they didn't really tell me because they didn't know how much would, stay there, how much would maybe be infected. At the end, I lost all of them. Basically just like this. True. Half of my thumb was still there, but all my fingers were gone. And I remember the first couple of times when they changed my bandages, I didn't look on purpose because I couldn't bring myself to acknowledge, to accept yet what I already knew was my life from that point moving forward. But I remember the first time I saw it, I held back the tears while the nurse was still in the room, and it's hard to describe what it felt like losing a body part. I feel like the best way I can describe it is losing a really close friend or a family member, or even like a pet that you had your whole life. It hurt in a very similar way, and you ask similar questions, and it took me years to get over that. And I was 20, as I already said, and one of my biggest hobbies was gaming. I was a gamer, I loved gaming, and therefore the thought of, can I ever game again? Am I able to, physically hold a controller and game? Crossed my mind a couple of times in the hospital, and that might sound weird to some people. It's a source of happiness for me, and I have had a lot of friends that were gaming, and we spent hours gaming online. We had LAN parties. I hosted LAN parties at my house, and gaming helped me a lot through my youth and finding like a group of like-minded people and having friends, essentially. I found really good friends in the gaming community, and I obviously asked myself, am I able to continue that, or do I have to let that go? So coming home after 6 weeks, I'm sorry, I'm just getting a little emotional thinking about the whole situation. Coming home after 6 weeks of staying at the hospital and finally being back in a familiar surrounding, and then at home, I knew that my life will drastically change from that point on. Especially in the first half year or a little more than that, I had only one functioning hand. I had to change my daily routine. I had to find new ways to, put on socks with one hand, put my clothes on with one hand, clean myself, wash myself with only one hand. I had to relearn a lot of things with my left hand, since my right hand was my dominant, or is my dominant hand. And it was incredible hard. I made a video about a few things about that a couple of weeks, month, I don't know, a year ago. You can find it here. Just a few little things that were incredibly hard to get used to and challenging, and at times disheartening, because I got really frustrating by not carrying out the simplest tasks that I was able to do before. And being back home also meant obviously being back around my Xbox, in my room with my TV, and I didn't turn on the Xbox for weeks after my accident. But I remember it was summer of 2011. I started to feel the urge again to at least try it. And back in 2011, there was no adaptable controller. There was basically no disabled controller gear or stuff for consoles, for PlayStation, Xbox, whatsoever. So I started to do some research. I went online, looked at videos, went on a deep dive on Reddit, and just tried to figure out how people in a similar situation were coping or were managing to game again. And I found a lot of stuff of people building their own controllers, contraptions, so they would, be able to sit on a desk playing PC games, or even taking apart controllers and putting them on a wooden board so you can access all the little buttons with their foot partly, or maybe just with one hand. And I honestly started thinking about building my own controller. I had no knowledge about it, but I was kind of desperate a little bit. But then I stumbled upon this YouTube guy, this video on YouTube, and I wish I could remember his name or the channel. But he essentially played the way I started playing, so with his left hand and his right foot. So this is the Xbox 360 controller, and it was basically the first controller I started gaming with my injury, and coming back to having this controller. The main problem was, you can see like this, so I was able to reach those buttons and technically up here, but it was super hard for me to reach this one and those buttons. I mean, technically now I can actually do it, which is surprising, but the main problem was this one. So I couldn't use this properly. I could use it, but then I had really hard time to do this. And in a lot of games you have to shoot and move the camera at the same time. So, and in this video I mentioned already, on YouTube I saw that this guy was basically playing, and the way he did it was sitting like this, and then just like this, and using his thumb for that. And the way he used the trigger, he just turned the controller. So he would just turn the controller and at the same time use the thumb of my left hand to use the camera. So for example, if I play shooter, I would need to shoot and aim, so I use my thumb, go down to the right stick, aim and shoot. And then Microsoft announced the Elite controller, and this is like the second version of it, the Elite 2. And that controller has paddles in the back, could also be here, but also here. And what that did was, I was holding the controller and I was able to use 4 more buttons essentially. So I could use those 2 with that fingers and those 2, and I could map those 2, basically those like up here, could map down here, which gave me the possibility to use my right hand for the buttons, for example, and technically also a little bit for the camera. I was able, with that controller, to actually play like this sitting. and it worked super well. And I remember the first time I did that, and I was so massively happy because this controller gave me back a little bit of normal gaming, I would say. I was finally able to not tilt the controller anymore, to use it with my foot, but to just stay like this. Use it also to aim and X, Y, B, A. Today, gaming with a disability is much easier, thankfully, to the minds of at Microsoft or even at Sony, and also a lot of companies that build gear to help disabled gamers to game again. And for me, one of the biggest things that just kept me going, kept me like, I need to do this again because it helps my mental health, it makes me happy, is to feel kind of normal, if that makes sense. To, you know, get immersed in different worlds and be somebody else, someone that has no disability, to get out of my own skin. And of course it was very frustrating at times, especially at the beginning, where I couldn't do certain things. I was really bad at certain games, especially at competitive games like shooters. There's a German saying, wo ein Wille ist auch ein Weg, which basically means where there's a will, there's a way. And I feel like it translates, or it goes so much deeper than just gaming. It's, you know, we as human, we are so capable of so much more. And in a lot of desperate situations, we can find ways to cope with them, to deal with them, and to live with them even. I could have totally accepted, like, okay, I'm not being able to game anymore, and just called it a day. But it was important to me and important to my mental health and my happiness, and so I kept trying things, and I'm happy that I did it. And I truly believe that whatever obstacle that is in your way, you can either work towards getting rid of it or around it, or manage to work with it. Life throws a lot of hurdles and there are stones in our paths, and sometimes it's really hard to, get where you want to be. And I mean this from the bottom of the heart. It brings you happiness because it's worth fighting for, and it also feels like an accomplishment, and especially in situations where you maybe lose a limb, where you have a disability. It also, again, brings kind of a normalcy back, if that makes sense. Like, you feel kind of normal again, maybe only in those little moments, but it helps a lot to cope with it. Thank you for watching, liking and subscribing if you like what I do. I am still trying to figure things out here. I appreciate you. Thank you. Bye.